Sandy says read, and welcome to the channel. Today we are going to do a long one. This is Rochester, Mr. Rochester, and the 2025 Bronte Conference. I've got a ton of notes here, you guys, and some of them I will just read directly for you guys. For example, today's book discussion is more than a double book review. I'm using two books I've recently read to bring you an indie book review and a trad book review, and a discussion of Bronte fan fiction and Bronte's scholarly pursuits. Buckle up. Okay, we'll do this in three parts. Part one, fan fiction discussion and disclaimers. They'll be very short. Number two, review of Rochester by J.L. Neiman. And part three will be a review of Mr. Rochester by Sarah Shoemaker. Now, both review sections will include information from the September 6th Bronte Conference. And let me explain a little bit of that for you. All right. Under an African Summer's Sun, Remapping the Brontes, Place, Race, and Empire. That was the name of the 2025 Bronte Conference that took place on Saturday, September 6th. The local time for this thing was 9 to 17:30. That was the time frame for this, which was 4 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. my time. So yeah, I had to get up a little bit early for this one. And I will be, I'll be honest and tell you guys that my alarm did not go off. Like I set my alarm to go off at 4 a.m. and it didn't happen. So I woke up at 5:30 and went, wait a minute. Why am I awake at 5:30? What's happened? My alarm didn't go. So I missed the keynote speaker. I completely missed the keynote speaker. I was disappointed. Anyway, the conference was presented by the Bronte Parsonage Museum at Fountains Church in Bradford. So I was able to get in. I think the second speaker had started speaking when I dove in. when I dove in, there was a special link, an unlisted link on YouTube for those of us who were attending online. There were different pay brackets for attending, and I was on the online pay bracket, obviously, here in Florida. I was there in time for a very special presentation that happened. And I'm just going to tell you guys, I got emotional, okay? Dr. Amber Regis, she read from one of the little books that Charlotte Bronte had put together when she was a child, when she was about 14 years old. She had written a little book, and it had obviously many entries in it, but one of the items that was included in this little book was a poem that Charlotte had written. And this little book from Charlotte had been in a private collection until fairly recently, when donors had helped the parsonage purchase this thing and get it to the Parsonage Museum. So it is now at the Bronte Parsonage Museum. It's now there in their collection. And this was an exclusive first reading of this poem. And it's called, we called it the Midnight Song, although I don't think that's what Charlotte had titled it. I don't know if it had a title or not, but that's what folks are calling it now. And it was lovely. It was wonderful to get to hear this. It moved me as Dr. Amber Regis was reading it. It was about being in exile. The poet was speaking of being in exile, and there were two voices in the poem, and it was just wonderful. It was lovely. And as she was reading, she was a few stanzas in when I realized the magnitude. Hang on, I'm going to get emotional again. But I realized the magnitude of what was happening, right? This was a poem that Charlotte had written when she was 14. It's been in a private collection where, a handful of people have been able to see it or read it or maybe read it to one another if they wish to, right? You guys, I was among a handful of people who have heard this thing in the past 100 years. It was amazing. And the theme of it, the topic, this voice in exile, everything about it just struck me. And of course I burst into tears. So I'm in my kitchen doing stuff for my birds and I'm sobbing like an idiot. It was very emotional. I was having a moment. I had to sit down and just collect myself. And yeah, it was emotional. It was lovely. I'm so I'm so glad that I got to be a part of that. It was lovely. Okay, moving on. Also, during the day, there was a presentation from Lucia Celdran Nogura. She is a PhD student at the University of Murcia in Spain, and she presented Jane Eyre Arrives to Spain, adapting Charlotte Bronte's work in the Francoist dictatorship. And I'm going to give an example or talk a little bit about something from her presentation when we go through these two books that we're going to talk about. Then there was a presentation from Alice Victoria Harling, a PhD candidate at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. She presented Charlotte Bronte's Conceptual Metaphors Silencing Colonial Subjects, Quassia Clamina in the Tales of Angria from 1828, and Bertha Mason in Jane Eyre from 1847. And that presentation had information that we're going to bring into discussion as we talk about these two books. And then there was a presentation from Dr. Simon Marsden, a senior lecturer at the University of Liverpool. He presented Jane Eyre and the Imagined Landscapes of Christian Mission. And he also has something that I wanted to bring up as we go through discussing these two books over here. Now, obviously, there were more presenters than that. There were a lot of good topics that folks talked about during the day. I don't know if the link to the presentations will be available again, and I certainly don't think that I'm allowed to give out that link. Okay, I mean, those of us who participated online had to pay for it. But if you are a member of the Bronte Society, or if you wish to be a member of the Bronte Society, you can have access to the papers that were presented that day. You can have access to those through the Bronte Studies and the Bronte Gazette. Those things, they are available to members of the Bronte Society. And I will put a link to that in the drop-down box below so that you too can become a supporting member of the awesomeness that is the Brontes, the ongoing Bronte studies and scholarly pursuits like that. Now, before we dive into reviews of these two books, I want to do a wee little bit of housekeeping, just a little bit. We need to do this. I want to welcome you guys to subscribe to the channel. I am my own sponsor here, so I welcome you to subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon so you're notified each time I do something like this here at the channel, something bookish, something of Jane Eyre interest, something of Charlotte Bronte interest, something of just bookish random interest. Also, because I am my own sponsor, I have a merch shop where you can purchase Christmas gifts, because yes, Christmas is coming. And also, I am an author. And so you could go to Amazon right now or Barnes & Noble, and you could get your own copy of Choices Meant for Gods, or Choices Meant for Kings, and Choices Meant for All in the Choices series. And you could look for references to the Brontes in my Choices series. It is epic fantasy, but in my world building, you can see that I am influenced by the Brontes. Find it for yourself. Okay, is that enough of that? Have I done enough of the sponsorship stuff? Yeah, we'll move on. You guys, I'm a small channel, I'm small beans, so I got to promote myself somehow. I also want to mention in our housekeeping that if you wanted to, you could go to the Bingo Baker website where I have some Sandy Says Read bingo phrases and words put together in a bingo sheet for you. You could print out your own Sandy Says Read Bingo Baker card. And as you follow along in today's video, which is going to be a doozy, you could click off the words that we use, the phrases that we use, and you could win your own bingo. There are no prizes. There's just the awesome feeling of winning bingo for yourself. And you know we're going to say a few of these because I think Jane Eyre is on here. Jane Eyre is supposed to be on here, you guys. Jane Eyre is one of the words in the Bingo Baker's card because I talk about Jane Eyre on this channel all the time. Shall we begin by diving into one of these books? Slight little coughing fit, and we can begin. The first book we're going to discuss is Rochester, a novel inspired by Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. This is by J.L. Neiman. And let me see if I can get the glare off of it for you guys a little bit. Get the glare off there. Right there you go. All right. The copyright is 2009. It was published by Trafford Publishing, and we will discuss that in just a minute. This particular version is 325 pages. It's written in first person past tense, and that first person point of view is Edward Rochester. Let me read the back cover for you guys. If I can, it's on reverse. It's reverse type. After years of self-centered wandering, shielding my shattered spirit from further vain expectation, I now knew what it was to be loved. Yet, a cursed, damaged, aging wretch as I had no right to one so innocent, lovely, good, and gifted as she. Edward Fairfax Rochester. He remains one of 19th century English literature's most enduring sex symbols. Yeah. And to this day, women the world over continue to swoon for him. Rochester is an imaginative exploration of Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, as seen through the eyes of a fiercely sensuous and introspective leading man. His story is told with all the realism of a passionate, masculine heart in narrative enriched with keen observations of settings and fellow players. Through Edward's words, we leave behind coincidence and politesse. I'm sorry, you guys. Politesse, to wander through the evocative world and probe what otherwise might have happened from that compelling first meeting onward. We are given Edward's life of pain and travel beside him to absolution through the unsullied form of a lonesome young governess. Here, Rochester tells of their journey in his own uninhibited, saucy, conceited, funny, manly way, and would never dream of fading to black when the bedchamber door shuts. You guys, you heard all those words, right? I do have a Sandy synopsis for you, but we're going to wait. We're going to give you the Sandy synopsis in a couple of minutes because let's look at the meeting. Okay, we do mention, that, we talk about the meeting here on the back cover. Let's look at the meeting of Jane and Rochester on pages 8, 9, and 10. As we do in these reviews, I do read a bit for you to give you like a flavor of the author's writing style. And I think that's going to be important to do in the discussion of this book. It's going to be important because J.L. Neiman has a good writing style. And I want to say that right up front about this book. I know that it's going to be difficult for me to keep negativity out of this review. I'm going to try. But it's going to be difficult for me to keep negativity out of this review because I was so disenchanted with some things in this book. But I've got to give credit where credit is due and say that Neiman's writing style, it was reminiscent of like an 1847 author. There were moments when you could feel that writing voice. Okay. And so I will read a little bit of this passage as we do in these reviews and let you feel that for yourself too. Okay. And I think that's good to do, especially with the meeting of Jane and Rochester. All right. So we have here, we're in Rochester's point of view. So all the I statements are from Edward. Grace Poole's last letter spoke of her charge's increasing preoccupation with fire and with all things that could burn. Now I must add pyromania to my prize's impressive list of aberrations. The rise declined into Dell, and there I diverted off the carriage road, entering onto the less frequented river path. Okay, so we see that Edward is he's riding his horse toward home. But he's thinking about Grace Poole and the letter that she's written to him. And he's distracted by these thoughts of, gee whiz, now Bertha is playing with fire in my home, right? He's distracted. Fog hung thick in the valley, where to my right the river ran high and rapid with rain and melting snow. Noise of turbulent water rushed in my ears, along with the more distant bleating of sheep grazing dead grass on the hillsides. Mist and rain bleared my eyes. Soon, I told myself, soon I will be warm and dry. Monsieur's pace slowed. Let me pause again for a minute. Monsieur is his horse, and Neiman has retained the name of the horse that Charlotte gave us in her novel, Jane Eyre. And when we get to Sarah Shoemaker's book, we will also see the name has remained. And Sarah explains to us, in Sarah Shoemaker's novel, she has Rochester explain to another character the naming of the horse. He explains that it came from the Arabian Nights. And I loved that detail being included because, of course, Charlotte took it from the Arabian Nights. Of course she did. I mean, the Bronte children were reading the Arabian Nights to one another all the time. Of course, that's where it came from. And I loved that Sarah included that in her book. All right. Anyway, the pace slowed. His hesitation increased as visibility in this damned whiteout fog became practically nil. I refused to relent, irritated and impatient, more with my thoughts than with the horse. But I whipped him mercilessly nevertheless. A bright fire and a glass of port were comforts I could obtain. Pilot was ahead now, invisible to me, and barking with energy. The sheep, yes, must be. Quite suddenly, a human form appeared out of the dense fog to stand directly in my path. It stood silent, still as death, and shockingly ethereal in this microcosm of white. I started and gasped. The spell shattered, and I saw the girl, for a girl it was, look up at me. She, too, was startled and stepped back defensively. No wraith would react so, surely. But Monsieur was skidding and rearing back, far back. We toppled. Down I went onto the coarse gravel path, leaving my leg pinned beneath the horse's weight and my ankle wedged between stone and stirrup. Searing pain shot through me, straight to my brain, sending a howl of agony reverberating through the valley. I gasped, cursing and swearing with vehemence. The horse righted himself quickly enough, and I did too, not wishing to remain prostrate on the wet ground. Upon attempting to bear weight on my left foot, another bolt of pain shot up my frame. I swore even more colorfully and leant down to feel my booted ankle. Only a sprain. Pilot was bounding about me now, barking and baying until the hills echoed. The girl stepped out of the misty white, coming close to me. "Are you hurt, sir?" she asked over the noise. Her voice was smooth and soft, full of genuine concern. "Down, Pilot!" I roared, whereupon silence immediately fell. I wanted to swear at this girl, but checked myself, as I thought, admirably. "Witch, what are you about, lingering in the fog, scheming to fell the horse of an unwary traveler? Get off away with you." She stood firm. "I've as much right to this path as yourself, sir. What's more, brusque words shall not drive me away. Seeing as your foot is injured, I should prefer to see you safely mount your horse before continuing upon my own purpose." I looked at her then, small and slight in build, no more than 20 years old. Her gray-green eyes were leveled directly upon mine. She was attired quaintly in plain gray with a tartan shawl, winter bonnet, and leather gloves. Her face was pale, but for cheeks and lips faintly rose-tinted with cold. She showed no fear of me, no consternation at the situation or my rough tone. She clearly meant to help me, whether I sought her help or not. "Curious time of evening for a young miss to traipse along a secluded bridleway," I tetchily observed. Her shoulders squared. "It is yet afternoon, sir, and this route, to my knowledge, is generally regarded as a footpath." The dignified yet respectful tone of her delivery stirred curiosity in me. To what house did this person belong? I foresaw no consequence in asking, and so I said, "Shall I find confidence in the assumption that the objective of this twilight trek of yours, young lady, is to arrive at your place of residence? And if so, where would that be?" Okay. Right. So that is our author's style. And we'll get a comparison of that in our next book, too. We'll look at that as well. All right. Now, I want to discuss just a little bit about Rochester. He seems a little brusque there, does he not? And that meeting. That meeting takes place where it's supposed to, in the misty, on the misty road, right? Okay. In Lucia's presentation during the Bronte Conference yesterday, as I filmed this, she explained to us that in the film adaptation for Spain, the Spanish audience was not going to accept the fact that Rochester, a man, would be thrown from his horse, and that Jane, a woman, would then assist him. The Spanish male, the Latin man, would not be excited about watching a film where a man was so degraded and a woman so elevated. just wouldn't fly. So I'm paraphrasing, of course, that just wouldn't fly. So they had to change the film adaptation and just make some alterations. And so they changed the meeting of Jane and Rochester completely. And in the film adaptation that Lucia talked about, did I say her name right? Lucia? Yeah, in the film adaptation that she shared with us during her presentation, Jane is praying in a chapel when she and Rochester meet. She's praying in the chapel. She has a rose on her, it's on her dress near her neck. Okay, so it's on her bodice, basically. She's praying in the chapel. She's on her knees. She's kneeling on her knees when Rochester comes into the chapel and approaches her while she's praying and does not speak, but reaches toward her chest and continues reaching. And she looks up at him, Jane does, and smacks him across the face, like to make him stop reaching for her chest. And he laughs at her as he removes the rose from her breast. Okay, so he takes this rose off of her. And there's a great deal of symbolism in that. I mean, Lucia didn't go into the symbolism as she was talking. She was concentrating on the scene and where it was taking place and the fact that Rochester just like laughs at her and walks away. He takes the rose and walks away, laughs at her. He does ask, where do you come from? And she said, I come from London, sort of Lowood. It's all different. Okay, it's a little bit different in that adaptation. So he laughs at her and leaves with the rose. As an English major myself, I saw a lot of symbolism in Rochester walking up to Jane, taking something, a rose, off of her, laughing at her and leaving. There's symbolism in there. The words I could use that YouTube probably wouldn't approve of and would strike me down for. But there's symbolism there that a lot of modern audiences have attributed to Mr. Rochester. Some modern audiences, some feminists have seen Rochester as this beastly man, as this manipulative and terrible individual. And they have mistreated him, in my opinion, because of that. And that scene that Lucia showed us during her presentation, just, it frustrated me. And I mean, I understood what she was presenting, and I appreciated her presentation very much. But it solidified for me this idea that folks out there in the world can see Rochester as this manipulative and distasteful individual. And in this book from J.L. Neiman, we do get a picture of Rochester that is distasteful. And that's unfortunate. And we're going to talk about that as we go on. Let's go to page 21. On page 21, we see that Rochester is preoccupied carnally with Jane. In this imaginative book, the Rochester character he's preoccupied with her body. He says, yet since meeting this Jane Eyre, she occupied my thoughts constantly. I could scarcely concentrate upon a single thought otherwise, and regardless of effort, I returned continually to daydreams of loving her, being loved by her, and to my self-condemnation of bedding her. Okay, so we're getting this picture of him as just being, I mean, of course, he's attracted to her. He's attracted to her in Charlotte's original Jane Eyre, in the Jane Eyre, right? But in this imaginative book from Ms. Neiman, it's very carnal. We'll go to page 103, where, let me get there for you guys, on page 103. And I wrote in my notes, like the Spanish film, Rochester is a cad. We have him interacting with Blanche Ingram. Now, in this particular imaginative version of Edward, Blanche Ingram is still after him for his estate, for his money, not necessarily for him. She's not in love with him. She's in love with his estate. And in this book, she is, again, thinking of the ways she can change Thornfield Hall and how she can make it better and more suited to her tastes. She is also a very lustful woman in this book. She is I'm just going to say she's a whore. Okay. She throws herself at men. She throws herself at Rochester. And in this scene, she has followed him to the cellar, the wine cellar, and they are alone in the wine cellar, and she's throwing herself at him again. And he is so apparently frustrated by that he's going to take advantage of it. And here we have it. He is roughly, I'm not going to read all of that. Basically, he's trying to take advantage of her. And that was enough for her. Her hands came up and she shoved at my shoulders, eyes flashing with anger and indignation. You are an animal, Edward. Why do you treat me like a filthy whore? She demanded. I released her. This is what I am, Blanche. Take it or don't. It gets no better. Not with you. So he's basically assaulting her in a manner, and she calls him out on it, and he tells her that's the best she's going to get from him. And that is the Edward Rochester we're seeing in this novel, and I don't like it. Further down the page, it says, Blanche was right. Part of me was animal, as with all of us, but with Blanche, there was no love, no bond to temper my base drives. Marriage to her would be empty, like taking a whore for a wife, senseless. He stands against the wall, his back against the wine. He's longing to be back home with Jane. He's afraid he's losing her. I doubled over, hands on knees, and released a sob. And he's thinking about Jane. I straightened and went to the lantern, dashed away the odd tear, and proceeded to choose an eclectic array of wines, including a Bordeaux, and blah, 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 blah. So he has just assaulted Blanche, cried about it, cried about missing Jane, and now he's picking out a wine to take upstairs. This is Edward Rochester in this novel, and I don't like it. I don't like the way he's portrayed. I don't like the way he's portrayed. I don't like the fact that people want to portray him this way. Don't like it. Now, on pages 134 and 135, we can look at that right now, because in both this imagining of Rochester and in Sarah's imagining of Rochester, we hint at a former marriage for Bertha Mason. This our mad woman in the attic. We hint at something that may have come before. Go to page 134. We had, then I thought of the lurking presence of a man and the occasions of seeing him loitering behind the bungalow. Rochester is talking about when they were living in Jamaica and they were first married, and he would see people coming to the house and spending time with Bertha. Once Bertha's madness progressed enough to require incarceration inside the house, she managed to escape on occasion. And each time I found her in the company of that same man. Remembered for many years in the plural men, but actually it was only one. She would cry upon being taken from him. When she did cry, I was startled to find she retained enough humanity to weep. As for the rumors of a marriage, who could say? Bertha was introduced to me in Jamaican society as Richard Mason's unwed younger sister. The family patriarch, Jeremiah Mason, corroborated the relationship, and our marriage certificate named her as Bertha Antoinetta Mason. I gave a short laugh now, thinking of how I still did not know whether Bertha was her first name or second, nor whether Bertha actually was the daughter of Jeremiah Mason and his reportedly deceased wife. To think otherwise was to believe unsubstantiated hearsay and the ramblings of a mischievous, jealous servant girl. I cared nothing for the opinion of my Jamaican neighbors, and so internalized the rumors surrounding my misfortune as they became public knowledge. Burying them within myself, I lived quietly with their possibilities gnawing at my soul for the next 15 years. So he doesn't know for sure that Bertha was never married before him. He just thinks it's rumors, and he's just kind of going with those as rumors. We get more on that idea in Sarah's imaginative book later. Now, let me go ahead and give you my Sandy synopsis now. Now that we've gone over a few of those things, I think my synopsis might make a little bit more sense. This is the first of 3 parts where we follow the reimagined story of Jane and Rochester from a Rochester's point of view. It's told in vulgar, salacious scenes, making both Edward and Jane appear carnal and undisciplined. This is a fan fiction of what could have happened if Jane were a tease and Edward a deviant, capable of assault. Right? Now, you can always find something good in a book. There are some pros as well as the cons that I've been going over. The pros I wrote down are the writing style. I mean, seriously, the writing style was reminiscent of 1847 in a number of ways. I mean, I did see a lot of passages where the writing style just made me feel like we were reading something of old. Okay, so it did have that flavor to it. Then it would get just racy, and it did not feel like something of old. The meeting in the mist, that meeting in the mist was a pro for me. The way that Jane and Rochester interacted during that meeting felt like something that was not true to the original, but was an homage to the original, and I liked that. Okay, and then little Adele. In this book, little Adele is, I mean, she's this precocious little kid, and I think that she was written well. I liked that. The cons was everything else, you guys. Seriously. So we're going to move on, and we're going to talk a little bit about the publishing of this novel. Trafford Publishing. I wanted to talk a little bit about that. I wanted to talk a little bit about the self-publishing and indie publishing route that some authors will take. And I don't want to talk down on that at all. I don't want to talk down on fan fiction, because fan fiction has a place okay? And it can be very well done, and it can be enjoyed by so many people. I'm going to give you some examples. Let's start with, there's an entity, there is a phenomenon out there called Archive of Our Own. AO3, it's abbreviated AO3. And I'm not saying that this originated with AO3. I do not know. I couldn't find it there. And that doesn't mean that it didn't originate there. It just means I couldn't find it there. I don't know. But Archive of Our Own has 9,185,000 users. That means that's how many people go to AO3 to read works or to post works or to participate in fan fiction. There are 15,760,000 works on that platform. There are 73,660 fandoms. Okay, you guys are probably familiar with the way this works. There is a fandom for like the Supernatural program, right? And so the two brothers in the Supernatural fandom, there are folks who write stories about those two brothers and foibles, that those two brothers get up to, right? There are people who write stories about them, and those stories are imaginative and fun and sometimes a little risque, right? So there's no place for those stories except to go online and to post them to AO3, to go online and post them to a Patreon channel, to go online and post them to a Substack, to post them to a personal blog, to share them with your friends. Okay, that takes place, and people enjoy that. And I throw no shade at that whatsoever. If you enjoy that, you do you. Okay? Awesome. Have fun with it. Enjoy it. Practice your writing skills doing that. Learn and grow and get better at writing doing that. Love it if you want to. If you never publish anything, fine. Have fun writing stories that bring you joy. Have fun writing stories that bring other people joy. Why would I dismiss that? That sounds fun to me. When I was a teen, my best friend Christine and I would write stories about Duran Duran. Yeah, we would write stories about Duran Duran doing fun stuff. We would take characters from TV shows and put them into the stories too, doing crazy stuff, okay? It was just fun to do. It was just fun. And we practiced our writing skills doing that. There are, I wrote down my friend Linda. She writes Stargate fan fiction. She writes Zorro fan fiction, and she puts those online on different forums. She does a really good job of it. She's a good writer, and this is fun stuff for her to do. You guys, if it's a fun thing to do, do it. Enjoy it. Have fun with it. My friends Janine and Christine, all the best stories start with Janine and Christine and I. When I would when I had the time, I would write little stories for them in like the Duran Duran universe or whatever universe, right? And I would give them these as like gifts, right? Janine would say, "Oh my God, a flat package has arrived." If a flat package had arrived, it meant there was a story inside, and she would get so excited about that. You guys, if you're writing little stories to bring each other joy, keep writing stories to bring each other joy. What's happened here is J.L. Neiman was writing fan fiction about Rochester for her and her Jane Eyre fans to have joy. And then she published it. She published the first of the 3 through Trafford Publishing. Here's where I get hesitant about that. Trafford Publishing launched in 1995. They offer 4 packages to basically take advantage of authors. I shouldn't say it that way. Let me back up, because I should not say that they take advantage of authors. I think what they're doing, in my opinion, is taking advantage of authors who have not had success publishing their works in other avenues. They're a vanity press, okay? So what they're doing is they have 4 packages that range from basically $2,000 to $15,700. Yeah, you could spend an awful lot of money taking a manuscript and publishing it yourself with Trafford Publishing helping you, basically. I find that to be a little bit predatory in some instances. For example, the Voyage package from Trafford Publishing, I mean, it's $10,500. They have another package that is $15,700. Those 2 are the 2 that offer editorial assessment and cover copy polish. The other 2, there's one for $2,000 and there's one for $5,300. Those 2 packages do not offer editorial help. They do not offer editorial assessment and cover copy polish. And I don't know what editorial assessment means. I don't know if that means an editor assists you with content editing or line editing or proofreading. I don't know. I don't know what that means. It's just an editorial assessment. I find that it feels to me as an author to be predatory. It feels to me like taking advantage of an author who needs help, not taking advantage of. That's what it feels like to me. That's what it feels like to me. So I have opinions about this. Obviously, those are my opinions about this. I recognize there are, myself included, I have self-published a number of my titles. Another handful of my titles have gone through independent publishing houses where I didn't have to pay a red cent to have them published. My self-published titles, I didn't have to pay to have them published. I paid an editor to help me with editing. I paid an illustrator to help me get covers done on a few of them. A few of them I did myself. You can probably tell which ones were professionally done and which ones I did myself. Okay. But to have a vanity press out there asking an author to pay $15,700 sounds predatory to me. I do not know what J.L. Neiman paid to have this book done, but because it was done through Trafford Publishing, she had to pay something. And that doesn't seem fair to me. It doesn't feel fair. It feels, to me, it feels predatory. It feels like someone took advantage of her. It feels like someone took advantage of her sharing joy with people online. And I don't like that. It makes me sad. I also, this is going to sound unfair, but I also think that this book could have used a content editor to tone it down. There is so much about this that is, like I mentioned, salacious. There's so much about this that is Edward and Jane being carnal. And you guys, I got up to page 164 and I quit. I DNF'd at page 164 because as a fan of Charlotte Bronte, as a fan of Jane Eyre, as a fan of Edward Rochester, I was disappointed in the way these two were carrying on. It was not in the spirit of Jane Eyre. Now we are going to talk about Mr. Rochester, a novel by Sarah Shoemaker. This one I enjoyed so much more. I enjoyed this so much, you guys. All right, here is the book. And let me give you the specs. This is Mr. Rochester, a novel by Sarah Shoemaker. Copyright 2017. Published by Hachette Book Group, Inc. in New York. This particular version is 447 pages plus 2-page epilogue. And there's also some acknowledgments, and I'm going to read for you in the acknowledgments on page, 451? Page 451, right here at the very bottom of it. It says, she's thanking a lot of people, and of course, to Charlotte Bronte, who masterfully invented this terrific character who has kept readers wondering for so many years. You guys, that makes me happy. As I mentioned a minute ago, there are, feminists and critics and folks who are so down on Mr. Rochester and so quick to turn him into that manipulative and nasty individual. And I don't see him as that nasty individual. He does get that redemptive arc. Charlotte Bronte does punish him for nearly dragging Jane into sin. He is punished for that, and he goes through his redemptive arc. We get that in Jane Eyre. I don't see him as this reprehensible, irredeemable cretin that he was turned into in our first book, Rochester, that we were just looking at. I don't see him as this terrible rake that he was portrayed as originally in that film adaptation that Lucia was talking to us about in her presentation yesterday at the Bronte Conference. I see him as this individual who has trauma from his past and things that have been done to him from his past, which Sarah gives us in this imaginative novel. Okay, going on. Let's see. I wanted to read the dedication to you guys too, because I identified with this. It says, for Kent, who has lived graciously these past few years with my fascination for another man. Yeah. We authors, we tend to get a little attached to our leading man characters. Yes, we do. Okay, this is written in first person point of view, past tense. And of course, that first person point of view is from Rochester's point of view. And I will read the inside front cover flap for you guys. Reader, she married me. For 170 years, Edward Fairfax Rochester has stood as one of literature's most romantic, complex, and mysterious heroes, sometimes haughty, sometimes tender, professing his love for Jane Eyre in one breath and denying it in the next. Mr. Rochester has for generations mesmerized, beguiled, and yes, baffled fans of Charlotte Bronte's masterpiece. But his own story has never been told. Now, out of Sarah Shoemaker's rich and vibrant imagination springs Edward, a vulnerable, brilliant, complicated man whom we first meet as a motherless little boy roaming the corridors of Thornfield Hall. Then, on the morning of Edward's 8th birthday, his father issues a decree. He is to be sent away to get an education, exiled from all he ever loved. As the determined young Edward begins his journey across England, making friends and enemies along the way, a series of eccentric mentors teach him more than he might have wished about the ways of the men and women who will someday be his peers. On the warm, languid shores of faraway Jamaica, where he is to take over his father's affairs, Edward grows entangled in morally dubious business dealings and a passionate whirlwind love affair with the town's ravishing heiress, Bertha Antoinetta Mason. But after a devastating betrayal, he must return to England with his increasingly unstable wife to take over as master of Thornfield. And it is there, on a twilight ride, that he meets the stubborn, plain young governess who will teach him how to love again. It is impossible not to watch enthralled as this tender-hearted child grows into the tormented hero Bronte immortalized, and as Jane surprises them both by stealing his heart. Mr. Rochester is a great, sweeping, classic coming-of-age story and a stirring tale of adventure, romance, and deceit. Faithful in every particular to Bronte's original, yet full of unexpected twists, this novel will completely, deliciously, and forever change how we read and remember Jane Eyre. Now, I'm not going to say that it's going to change how I read Jane Eyre, but it does have some cool twists and turns that make us go, ah, interesting. There were a couple moments when I gasped as I was reading this thing. There's one particular moment where Rochester receives a letter from his father's lawyer, his father's solicitor back in England, and I gasped. I mean, we know that his father dies. We know this, but the letter's contents just made me go, oh, what? Yeah. There's just moments that made me go, what? Yeah. Well done. Okay. I'm going to give you the Sandy synopsis. And you guys, I'm just going to read the Sandy synopsis that I wrote. Otherwise, we're going to be lost. Okay. This book is written in 3 parts. Book 1 shows Edward as a child, bullied by his older brother Roland and ignored by his father. The father and Roland are thick as thieves and travel, but Edward is sent to study at Black Hill with Mr. Lincoln. Lincoln gives his students nicknames, and Edward's is to be Jamaica. He makes friends of boys named Carrot and Touch. These friends finished and left before him because Edward was to do what his father commanded. Finally, his father sends word it's time for Edward to go to Mr. Wilson's, but there's no other instruction. It's the Maysbeck Mill, where Sarah weaves education for Edward, Luddite riots, as what I saw as a nod to Charlotte's Shirley, and scenes where Edward is reunited uncomfortably with Carrot, who is also friends with Roland. The sibling rivalry is tense and constant undercurrent. So let's go to page 55 and page 86. We're not finishing the synopsis yet, but I want to show you these Luddite riots and how they come into play. Edward has gone to Mr. Wilson's mill, and he's working there, and he's doing a very good job there. He's also learning while he's there. He's still getting his education, basically. All right. Evenings after tea were spent in the parlor, Mrs. Wilson at her handwork, and Mr. Wilson reading the newspaper. For the first time, I had regular access to newspapers, the Leeds Intelligencer every week, but also sometimes the Mercury or the Times from London. And the fact that I devoured them seemed to please Mr. Wilson, who was also wont to bring me into conversation regarding some piece of news in almost every issue. At first, I had little idea what he was talking about: the Corn Laws, the Tories, whom he hated, and the Whigs, whom he tolerated, the Luddites, whom he of course despised, and the Jacobites, whom he dismissed entirely. I thought he had received a decent education at Black Hill, but with Mr. Wilson, I realized how narrow had been my previous training. As Mr. Wilson explained, large landholders throughout the country had been consolidating their holdings, just as Roland had proposed to my father years before, enclosing the common land and throwing out their renters, who were left with no way to make a living. These folk flooded into the towns and cities searching for work, but at the same time, the introduction of machines to replace human hands further reduced the work available. It was an unfortunate but necessary side effect of a business like Mr. Wilson's, for Maysbeck Mill's machines now did the work that skilled spinners, weavers, and fullers had once done. I could not help feeling pity for the desperate country folk who overran every town and city, but at the same time, I saw how it frustrated Mr. Wilson. Didn't they understand that in the cities there were not nearly enough jobs for them all? Given the sorry state of things, it was not surprising that manufactories like ours became the targets of hooligans bent on smashing the machines that had replaced working folk. Indeed, Mr. Wilson employed a night watchman to guard his mill, Bert Combs, whom I had met the night I arrived. He was rough-looking and coarse-speaking, with a nose permanently misshapen in fights. I surely would not have wanted to be at the receiving end of his cudgel, but the few times I saw him, he was never less than pleasant to me. And I wrote up here in the top, hints of Charlotte's Luddite concerns. Yeah, okay. And then on page 86, go here. Here. Okay. At this point, Rochester has moved to a boarding house. He's no longer living in the house with Mr. and Mrs. Wilson because Mrs. Wilson's sister, who's going mad, has come to live with them. So he's in a boarding house and someone has come to get him. It's the mill, he shouted as soon as he caught his breath. Men, he shouted at me. Villains attacking the mill. And suddenly I realized it should have registered with me before. The mill bell was ringing, clanging wildly in the night, the most ominous sound, an attack on the mill. Oh God, I thought, they've come to Maysbeck. Luddites. The name had only been a distant possibility. Men angry at the mechanizations that had taken their jobs. The newspapers had lost interest. There was little mention of them anymore. And anyway, one always assumes such catastrophes happen elsewhere. I threw on my clothes while the boy stood watching, as if to make sure I really would come. And then I followed him, barreling down the narrow stairs and out into the night. We ran the full distance to the mill, a mile or more, only a pale half moon to light the dark, the sounds growing louder as we approached, shouts and crashes and even gunshots. There was a crowd, lighted by the torches they carried. Some were attempting to beat down the double oaken doors, while others shouted angrily, waving cudgels or anything else they could use as a weapon. I knew I had heard shots, but at first I could see no sign of a gun. Then I saw, in a third-floor window of the mill, Bert Combs with a musket, which he shot from time to time, more to frighten the mob away than to kill or injure anyone. No one dies, but it does get quite tense. Okay, is that enough of the? Yeah, that's enough of the Luddite uprising there. Let's go back to our synopsis. We have we're still in book 1. We also have an introduction to madness and its effect on a family in this first part. Okay, when Mrs. Wilson's sister descends into madness and comes to live at the house, Edward goes to the boarding house and then starts to learn independence there too. It's when Edward takes Mrs. Wilson to visit her sister that he has a chance to sneak over to Thornfield and see his childhood home. Thankfully, his father and Roland are away. Now, in chapter 15, let's see if I've got this marked for you guys. Yeah, chapter 15, his father sends for him to come to his place in Liverpool. Mr. Wilson is getting quite ill, and he's basically going to die. So a relative of the Wilson family comes to the mill and it's going to take over. So Mr. Rochester, the father, sends for Edward to come to him. So he goes to Liverpool, and his father is showing him around some of his business holdings there. And I put a note here on page 141. Chapter 15 was Liverpool, and we're already off to Cambridge. I mean, that was quick. We've had so much of his life taking place, not painstakingly, but in great detail up to chapter 15. And then chapter 15 seemed very fast. And now chapter 16, where he's at Cambridge. And at Cambridge, he's going to study for 4 years. And his friend Carrot, whom we met back at Black Hill, his friend Carrot, he dies in this chapter. And it's quite sudden. It's off page, it's off screen. We don't see it. But when Edward learns of it, he is devastated because Touch also died off screen, off page. And when Edward learned of it, he was devastated. And that happens just, everything is very quick in these 2 chapters. And so I wrote up here on this note, got through Cambridge and Carrot's death in chapter 16. Wow. I mean, we're moving quickly. All of a sudden, we're moving quickly through these things, and we're getting up to book 2. Book 2 is when we finish Cambridge, and it's time for him to go to Jamaica. And I wrote here, book 2 takes us to Jamaica, and I think we all know what happens there. I did put a note on page 160. What is that? Oh, yes. Okay, in Jamaica, in those days, they were still steeped in the slave trade, and the people in Jamaica still used humans as free labor. And Edward Rochester is not comfortable with that, and he states he states in no uncertain terms he's uncomfortable with it. There is a scene where we go past some workers in the field, and he says, but I still could not imagine being the one to administer the whip, and I hoped that I would not be called upon to do so. And I put a note up here that says, I hope he's going to come out of this arc quickly, because in this first section of book 2, and when he first gets to Jamaica, it feels as if Rochester was starting to accept the idea that some people are used as slaves. And I felt really uncomfortable with this character accepting that notion. He does not accept that notion. He sort of accepts the fact that this is how it is done here in Jamaica, but he's never comfortable with it, which is good. He doesn't grow comfortable with it, which is good. I was so thankful that Sarah Shoemaker did not fall into the same trap that other critics and some other writers have fallen into, where Rochester is a cad or dismissive or mean. She did not fall into that. And I'm so thankful. She kept him good. In my opinion, she kept him able to rise above what was considered the norm or what was considered acceptable. He, in fact, did I put this in the synopsis? Hold on. Did I put it in the synopsis? Okay, yes, we do get into that in the synopsis. All right, let's move on to then. Getting ahead of myself, you guys. Book 3. Book 3 is the return with Bertha to England and more elements that are familiar to readers of Jane Eyre, but told from Edward's perspective. Sarah, our author, includes the meeting in the mist, the fortune telling, the wedding scene, the fire, and the glorious reunion. All right, now we're going to go ahead and dive into some review and discussion of the book. That was our full Sandy synopsis. Something I want to address at this point in the review is the treatment of Edward Rochester. I'll try not to be too hard on Neiman here. You know, I've already mentioned things. I don't want to dive too much further in it, but Edward Rochester is the Byronic hero. Okay, he is Charlotte's hero. All right, and Charlotte Bronte, let's see, yep, she punished Edward for tempting Jane into sin. Okay, he was going to become a bigamist. He was going to marry her, even though he already had a wife. He was going to end up making her a mistress, right? That if they had had children while he was still married to Bertha, those children would have been left out of the will. They would have been left out of inheritance. It would have been a bad thing. Okay, this is the truth. This is the truth of Jane Eyre. Okay, it would have been bad, but he was leading Jane into sin by trying to make her his wife, and Charlotte Bronte punishes him for that. Okay, Edward pays the price for that in what happens to him, and okay, you get it. I'm going to leave it at that. So my opinion that Neiman did the character, it is my opinion that Neiman did the character no favors. Let's go to page 325 in here. Now, I just told you guys I did not finish this book. I didn't finish it, but I did have to look up the number of pages in the book to put it in the specs for you guys. And when I did that, I saw at the back of this, hold please, I'll get there. I saw on the last page some language, some words being exchanged. And so I started reading the last page. And on the last page, we have Rochester is speaking to himself, but he's speaking of a letter that I guess he has read that Blanche has written. And he says to himself, well, yes, I am selfish, Blanche. I will give you that. But any mercilessness is reserved only for you, dear heart. And what else? Brutish and lustful treatment of women? And that's what Blanche, I guess, has written in her letter. I suppose there was some truth to that as well. Women who valued me only for my wealth and station did inspire an eruption of my worst behavior. And I looked at that and I thought, wait a minute. So on the very last page of this first book, Neiman still has Rochester blaming others for his actions. So there's not really an arc happening for Rochester in this first book, apparently, because even on this last page, he's still blaming women for his bad behavior. And that's kind of a shame. That's unfortunate, I think. And so I think that Neiman's treatment of Rochester is just unfortunate. I don't like it. Yeah. But as I was saying, I was worried. Yeah, I was worried when we started book 2 of Sarah's Mr. Rochester, because I thought we were going to descend into that same treatment of Edward Rochester. I thought we were going to start treating him as a reprehensible character. Thank goodness we didn't. Okay. And then, yeah, during the conference yesterday, Alice Victoria Harling, during her presentation, she was talking about the difference between good and dark, between light and dark, between good and evil. She was talking about those two differences and showing the beastliness of Mr. Rochester. And she just came right out and said in her presentation that Rochester is a beast. And I was disappointed in that conclusion being made during the presentation. I understood in the context of what she was saying why that conclusion was being made, but I was still disappointed in it. And I'm disappointed in it because so many folks make that conclusion when we shouldn't. And I'm just going to say that we shouldn't. We should not make that conclusion of Mr. Rochester. And I'm pleased that Sarah Shoemaker's book, gives us backstory on Rochester. Is it backstory that Charlotte would have written? Well, no, because Charlotte didn't write it. But it's backstory that gives us more compassion for Edward Rochester. And I like that. Right. What else do I have in my notes? Edward worked to protect Bertha, as well as keep his promises to her father Jonas and to God. We'll go to page 237 and 243. So 237. He is doing a little bit of whining here, but he says, but I had made a pledge, a promise to God and to Jonas to keep Bertha as my wife, never to abandon her. God knew she was not my wife in any sense but the legal and the moral, and never would be again. But neither could I abandon her. Given that, what kind of life could I have there? As the thunder accentuates this point for us. What kind of life could I have there? What kind of life could I have in either place? He is considering going back to Thornfield Hall. He has received the letter from his father's estate saying, your dad's dead, Roland's dead, come on back if you want to, Thornfield is yours. And he's trying to decide, what should I do? Well, he's deciding he's going to take Bertha back to England. He thinks that will be good for her if he can do it properly, if he can do it the right way. And on page 243, we see how he is trying to do this in the best way for Bertha. He is still considering how to do this in a way that will be like the least traumatizing to the madwoman he's conjoined with, right? Let's see. It was already November. The skies would have turned gray over Thornfield, and the cold would have descended on the moors, and the hall would be damp and cold, with no one living there to keep up the fires. It was one thing to completely disrupt Bertha, to take her to an unfamiliar place with unfamiliar sounds and smells and food and people, but it would be downright cruel to do so in weather she had never known, in a chill that would creep into her bones in ways she had never experienced. And Molly. Bertha would go nowhere without Molly, and yet the moment Molly set foot on England's shore, she would be free. I could, as her master, force her to leave Jamaica, but if she were unhappy in England, I could not force her to stay. No, I would have to be patient. I would have to wait until spring, wait so that we could arrive in June with its pleasant weather, its lark-filled skies and flower-strewn meadows. I had to bring them both, Bertha and Molly, and Tiso too, at a time that had the best chance of enticing them. The thought of it excited me, so that I even began to imagine that a new place could perhaps enthrall Bertha and cure her mind. It could be. Could it not? I told myself. Okay, now he's not only working to bring these three, Bertha, Molly, her trusted servant, and Tisa, Molly's child, to England with him, but he's thinking of how to do this best. And then he figures out how he can do it so that he can bring Molly and Tiso and he can give them their freedom. He's going to bring them to England and he's going to let them know, hey, come across the ocean with me, come to Thornfield Hall, and at that time, just help me get Bertha set up, and then you are free. I'm going to give you your papers. You will be free. You can go where you want to go. You can do what you want to do. I will help you get set up. Just please help me get Bertha there. Help me get yourselves there, and you'll be free. So he's trying to find a way to get them free. And there is another servant who works for him. Her name is Suki. And she actually has been taken advantage of by his father, by Jonas Mason, Bertha's father. This poor girl, she works for Edward Rochester, and Edward Rochester has shown her nothing but kindness. He has always been kind to her and never taken advantage of her, which I don't know if you would say that's just kind, but that's just proper. But he decides he's going to give her freedom right now. And he says here, the second task was to meet with Foster to arrange for the papers to be drawn up for Suki's freedom. And I left her at the townhouse to do with as she pleased. I felt a bit of regret at those arrangements, for Suki had been a comfort, and Jamaica itself had done me no harm, had in fact pushed me into becoming a man. Da, da, da. So he takes care of that. Okay, something that, you guys, I really hope that the power doesn't go out and I lose all of this. Okay, something that Sarah does a great job of is removing Edward's agency. She lets things happen to him. Even when he's working at the Maysbeck Mill and learning and taking on responsibility and independence, we have the sense of that looming specter of his father. And yeah, other characters like Carrot. Yeah, okay. Other characters like Carrot tell him he could do what he wants, but he seems to remind himself again and again that he can't do what he wants. There's that looming specter of his father and his father's will. And then, of course, we end up with the looming specter of Bertha, very real looming specter of Bertha in the attic. Let's look at page 251, if I can get there. All right. This is at the beginning of book 3, when Edward is deciding to take Bertha, Molly, and Tiso across the ocean. He's going to take them back to Thornfield Hall. And it's as if he's trying to hide his agency. He's made a decision, but he's trying to hide it, okay? So he feels like he must hide it to protect it, okay? In all the years of my life, this return to England was my first important decision, beyond the purchase of the sea nymph and the dragon, that had not been orchestrated by my father. And I took substantial joy and confidence in that fact. I kept this decision to myself, save for Everson in England and my solicitor in Jamaica, and of course Osmond and Whitledge, and I made sure they understood the importance of confidentiality in this matter. Even Molly would not know until absolutely necessary. So he's keeping everything close to the vest here. It's as if he's so afraid that something's going to go wrong, something's not going to work out, and he's going to be trapped. So much of this book, he just feels like if something's going to go wrong, he's going to be trapped. Oh, we've got Bertha looming as a specter. Okay, now I mentioned when discussing Neiman's Rochester that both of today's authors hint at a former marriage for Bertha. Okay, I read a couple pages of that where we see that Bertha may have had a man in her life in Jamaica, that maybe she was married to someone else. We have that here in Sarah's novel too. And in fact, a full-grown man named Gerald Rochester with the thunder. Yes, the perfect. We have a man named Gerald Rochester who arrives in our third act in this third book. So let's go to pages 390 and 391. You guys, this is just an absolutely climactic moment when this happens. This Gerald Rochester fellow has arrived, and he claims that Roland Rochester, the brother, is his father. That Roland had an affair with Bertha, married her, and that Gerald is the result. And there's, folks have figured out that maybe this happened, that Bertha had this baby and the baby was taken from her and sent to the Americas, and that Gerald grew up in the Americas and now he's come back and he wants his inheritance. If he is the son of Roland, then he gets the inheritance. He would get Thornfield Hall. He would get all the holdings. He would get everything. And Rochester would be penniless. Rochester would have to go back to Jamaica, back to his holdings in Jamaica. It would not be good. But Rochester is thinking about this. He's like, well, hey, If this is so, Gerald can have it all. He can have it all. I just want Jane. He can have everything. He can have his mother, and I will denounce Bertha. I will divorce her because she's had this man first. She was married to Roland first. I can divorce her now. Parliament will let me divorce her, and I can have Jane. It's worth it. I will give up everything to have Jane. He's going to do this. And there are 2 letters that Gerald brings with him, with his solicitor, that say, that they're from Rochester's father. And they say, my son has married Bertha, and yay, we're so proud of this. These 2 letters are confirming that his son has married Bertha. And the dates on these letters, spelled all the way completely out, prove that they happened before Edward ever went to Jamaica. They are in line with when Roland was there. So it looks like Roland was married to Bertha. It looks like this is true. It looks like Edward is going to lose everything and can have Jane. It looks like this is going to happen. But Edward takes a look at those letters and he's like, wait a minute. This is not quite right. This is not quite my father's hand. And this is certainly not the way my father spelled dates. This is not the way my father put dates on his letters, because Edward has letters that his father had written concerning him and moving him from place to place all these years. He's got like 15 of them, right? And he compares those 15 letters he has to these 2 from Gerald. And he's like, oh, no, these don't match up. These are forgeries. These 2 that Gerald has brought are forgeries. They're not real. I can't get out of the marriage to Bertha. This isn't real. This guy is lying. I'm stuck. Or I could just let these go through. I could just let these forgeries go through. I could do that. So he's stuck. He doesn't know what. So here we go. Page 390 and 391. We're in the solicitor's office. And he's looking at these letters and he's thinking about them. He says, the letters were laid out again on Everson's desk, and I examined them more carefully. Suddenly, I, who had been a copier of letters in my childhood, realized 2 things simultaneously. 1, these letters of Gerald's were falsified. My father's letters never included the full date, and the dates here were in a subtly different pen, a different hand. Gerald, or someone looking out for his interests, must have added the dates to make these letters a clearer proof. But my attention was drawn even more strikingly to the second realization, the promises referred to between my father and Jonas. If the dates had been falsified, and I now was convinced that they had been, then there could be only one meaning to the words. There had been an agreement between Jonas and my father, a long-term arrangement that played out only when I arrived in Jamaica, one that culminated in my blind marriage to the young woman with whom my brother had earlier fathered a bastard child. My arrival in Jamaica had apparently been planned as an arrangement to clean up my brother's indiscretion, my own life a payment into the account of my brother's irresponsibility. God, my whole life? I could not comprehend it, but there was no other explanation I could see. All I had believed, all I had understood about my father and his care of my future, it was all lies. He was protecting Roland, and I was the coin he chose to spend. And Jonas Mason as well, who had in his last years been like a father to me. He had taken me as payment for my brother's sins. At least Jonas had had a reason, love for his own child. And my father's reasons, I could barely even think it. To uphold his business dealings, whatever they might have been with Jonas, while at the same time saving Roland from marrying a girl with Bertha's inheritance, to save his holdings and Roland at my expense. My whole life. That. I gazed around at the others, and they were all staring at me, wondering what I was seeing. It was clear that I was the only one to have noticed the fraud, and the fate of my life, and that of Thornfield, lay in my hands. I could speak and save my claim to Thornfield, hold on to the Rochester heritage that had once been Roland's, but had now become mine. Or I could stay silent, let my father's lands go to this Jamaican bastard, and be free to claim Jane as my own. I could have wept. I could have bellowed. Instead, I swallowed and spoke. Yes, all right. This is finished. You're certain? Everson asked, frowning somewhat, for he could see that there was more going on in my head. Yes. Then we are done here, Ramsdell said, gathering up the letters. Good day, gentlemen. But he does. He comes to his senses, and he does come to the solicitor's office later, and he does show them, hey, this is wrong. This is wrong. These are forgeries. Gerald is a liar. Gerald forged these. Gerald gets in trouble for it, and blah, blah, blah. But that was a climactic moment in the book for me, when Rochester looks at those letters and realizes his father betrayed him in every sense of the word. Yeah, man, harsh dealings right there. Okay, let's do some comparing and contrasting of some scenes in these books. Because you guys, why not? It was good stuff. Okay, we read the Meeting in the Mist, right? We read that in Neiman's book earlier in this video. You might not remember because it was so long ago. We read pages 8 through 10 of The Meeting in the Mist. Let's now read the meeting in Sarah's book, how she envisioned it. Let's see. Starting with some foreshadowing. You guys, Sarah did such a good job. I just cannot say that enough. I'm so pleased with this novel. On page 305, I can get there. On page 305, Sarah brings up the horse. Okay. Blanche Ingram was picking at Edward about the horse he was riding when she first interacted with him at Ingram Park. Oh, and I wrote here, awesome placement of this foreshadowing. She tells him that his horse is just not good enough for him or her. Let's see, the hunts were grand indeed, and a welcome distraction from the vexations back at Thornfield. I was able to give a good accounting of myself, though Miss Ingram frequently teased me that my mount was lacking in the steel and daring of her own. The horse was not, she insisted, acceptable for a man like me, for he sometimes hesitated at the hedgerows and shied away when other riders veered too close. What kind of man exactly did she think I was? I asked, laughing. She replied with a wink that she expected me to have charge of my steed. And he tells her the truth, or he says the truth was, I wanted neither Miss Ingram nor any other woman in a serious way. I had lost any conviction that I would ever find a true companion, and I was certainly in no position to be courting someone so close to Thornfield. Bertha's existence made marriage in England impossible. In fact, her mere presence at Thornfield made my own happiness equally elusive. Only distance had given me the freedom I needed to keep my own mind still. But this talk of the horse, I mean, it's foreshadowing, right? He goes to this particular horse is not good enough. He shies away. So Edward has to get a new one. And he does. He goes and he gets Monsieur, right? He gets that horse. So that horse is new and unused to him when they stumble upon Jane later. Yes. Let's go to their actual meeting on page 313. I can find it. Hang on, you guys. Take me a minute to get there. All right, 313. And he is distracted. He's bought the horse and he's headed home and he's thinking on many things. In my distraction, I was not paying the attention I should have to Monsieur's footing, to the telltale slips of the hoof that foretell disaster. We came around a curve in the pathway where moisture from a recent rain had frozen into a thin sheet of ice. Suddenly, Monsieur's hooves lost their purchase, and before I could react, we were both of us falling onto the frozen causeway with the kind of crash that shatters bones. I was dazed for a moment, as was the horse, but when I came to myself, I discovered I was entangled with him, and he groaned as if he were near death, a sound that frightened the deuce out of me. I struggled mightily to remove myself from my entanglement, swearing to myself as if it would help the effort, as Pilate snuffled around us both. I thought I heard a voice and peered about into the gloom, but seeing no one, I was put in mind of childhood tales of woodland sprites haunting this vicinity. Then the voice came again, more clearly. Can I do anything? I looked toward the sound and saw a little thing, barely half my size. Not a sprite after all, but a child. I ordered it to one side, afraid it might get hurt, and managed to scramble to my feet, a sudden pain flashing through my ankle. As I helped Monsieur stand and checked him for injuries, Pilot leaped and barked around us in either joy or concern. I had just limped my way to a convenient nearby stile when I was surprised to hear the voice again, for I had forgotten that I was not alone on the path. "If you are hurt and want help, sir, I can fetch someone, either from Thornfield Hall or from Hay." "Thank you," I said, without glancing up, feeling instead at my twisted ankle. "I shall do. I have no broken bones, only a sprain." Hoping to prove those words, I stood again, and immediately felt a fiercer stab of pain in my ankle. "I cannot think of leaving you, sir." It was only then, at this last insistence, that I truly saw the creature and realized that it was neither a sprite nor a child proper, but a young woman with a pale, otherworldly face, all bundled in a beaver bonnet and a merino cloak and a muff. I could not fathom what she might be doing on the path, all alone at twilight. "I should think you ought to be at home yourself," I said, "if you have a home in this neighborhood. Where do you come from?" I was surprised to hear her tell me she came from Thornfield itself. The warm familiarity with which she spoke the name of my home struck me as both charming and rather improper. Clearly she had no idea I was its master, yet she harbored evident affection for it, as I once had. When I tried to draw out her identity without revealing my own, I was astonished to learn that she was the new governess. "I cannot commission you to fetch help," I said to her, "but you may help me a little yourself, if you will be so kind." She had no umbrella on which I might lean to make my way to my horse, so I asked her to fetch Monsieur to me. I saw too late that she had no experience with horses, and Monsieur, proud beast, could tell that too. Yet she was a determined little thing, and fearless, and knowing Monsieur was well trained and would do her no harm, it brought me great pleasure to witness a stubbornness in her nature that seemed to match that of my spirited horse. And you guys, as a nice little treat for us, let's read that meeting from Jane Eyre and Charlotte herself. The din was on the causeway. A horse was coming. The windings of the lane yet hid it, but it approached. I was just leaving the stile, yet as the path was narrow, I sat still to let it go by. In those days I was young, and all sorts of fancies, bright and dark, tenanted my mind. The memories of nursery stories were there amongst the other rubbish, and when they recurred, maturing youth added to them a vigor and vividness beyond what childhood could give. As this horse approached, and as I watched for it to appear through the dusk, I remembered certain of Bessie's tales, wherein figured a north of England spirit called a guy-trash, which, in the form of horse, mule, or large dog, haunted solitary ways, and sometimes came upon belated travelers, as this horse was now coming upon me. It was very near, but not yet in sight, when, in addition to the tramp, tramp, I heard a rush under the hedge, and close down by the hazel stems glided a great dog, whose black and white color made him a distinct object against the trees. It was exactly one form of Bessie's Guidrish, a lion-like creature with long hair and a huge head. It passed me, however, quietly enough, not staying to look up, with strange preter-canine eyes in my face, as I half expected it would. The horse followed, a tall steed, and on its back a rider. The man, a human being, broke the spell at once. Nothing ever rode a guy-trash. It was always alone. And goblins, to my notions, though they might tenant the dumb carcasses of beasts, could scarce cover shelter in the commonplace human form. No guy-trash was this, only a traveler taking the short cut to Millcote. He passed, and I went on. A few steps, and I turned. A sliding sound and an exclamation of "What the deuce is to do now?" and a clattering tumble arrested my attention. Man and horse were down. They had slipped on the sheet of ice which glazed the causeway. The dog came bounding back, and seeing his master in a predicament, and hearing the horse groan, barked till the evening hills echoed the sound, which was deep in proportion to his magnitude. He snuffed round the prostrate group, and then he ran up to me. It was all he could do. There was no other help at hand to summon. I obeyed him, and walked down to the traveler, by this time struggling himself free of his steed. His efforts were so vigorous, I thought he could not be much hurt, but I asked him the question. "Are you injured, sir?" I think he was swearing, but I'm not certain. However, he was pronouncing some formula which prevented him from replying to me directly. "Can I do anything?" I asked again. "You must stand on one side," he answered as he rose, first to his knees and then to his feet. I did, whereupon began a heaving, stamping, clattering process. accompanied by a barking and baying which removed me effectually some yards distance. But I would not be driven quite away till I saw the event. This was finally fortunate. The horse was reestablished, and the dog was silenced with a "Down, pilot!" The traveler now, stooping, felt his foot and leg, as if trying whether they were sound. Apparently something ailed them, for he halted to the stile whence I had just risen, and sat down. I was in the mood for being useful, or at least officious, I think, for I now drew near him again. "If you are hurt and want help, sir, I can fetch someone either from Thornfield Hall or from Hay." "Thank you, I shall do. I have no broken bones, only a sprain." And again he stood up and tried his foot, but the result extorted an involuntary "ugh." Something of daylight still lingered, and the moon was waxing bright. I could see him plainly. His figure was enveloped in a riding cloak, fur-collared and steel-clasped. Its details were not apparent, but I traced the general points of middle height and considerable breadth of chest. He had a dark face, with stern features and a heavy brow. His eyes and gathered eyebrows looked ireful and thwarted just now. He was past youth, but had not reached middle age. Perhaps he might be 35. I felt no fear of him, but little shyness. And had he been a handsome, heroic-looking young gentleman, I should not have dared to stand thus questioning him against his will and offering my services unasked. I had hardly ever seen a handsome youth, never in my life spoken to one. I had a theoretical reverence and homage for beauty, elegance, gallantry, fascination, but had I met those qualities incarnate in masculine shape, I should have known instinctively that they neither had nor could have sympathy with anything in me, and should have shunned them as one would fire, lightning, or anything else that is bright but antipathetic. If even this stranger had smiled and been good-humored to me when I addressed him, if he had put off my offer of assistance gaily and with thanks, I should have gone on my way and not felt any vocation to renew enquiries. But the frown, the roughness of the traveler set me at my ease. I retained my station when he waved to me to go, and announced, "I cannot think of leaving you, sir, at so late an hour, in this solitary lane, till I see you are fit to mount your horse." He looked at me when I said this. He had hardly turned his eyes in my direction before. "I should think you ought to be at home yourself," said he. "If you have a home in this neighborhood, where do you come from?" "From just below, and I am not at all afraid of being out late when it is moonlight. I will run over to Hay for you with pleasure, if you wish it. Indeed, I am going there to post a letter." "You live just below? Do you mean at that house with the battlements?" pointing to Thornfield Hall, on which the moon cast a hoary gleam, bringing it out distinct and pale from the woods, that, by contrast with the western sky, now seemed one mass of shadow. "Yes, sir." "Whose house is it?" "Mr. Rochester's." "Do you know Mr. Rochester?" "No, I have never seen him." "He is not resident, then?" "No." "Can you tell me where he is?" "I cannot." I could keep going on, but there they are. There is the meeting in Charlotte's hand. What other thing do you want to compare and contrast? The fire. You guys, the fire scene. We should compare and contrast the fire that was set in Rochester's bedroom. Now, it will feel a little blasphemous to discuss this from Neiman's text. I will be careful how much of it I share. So on pages 64 and 65, we're going to look at a bit of the aftermath of the fire in Rochester's bedroom. We know that he goes upstairs to see Bertha and Grace Poole, to see what was happening, what's going on, settle things down up there, right? We know that takes place. We've not seen it from Rochester's point of view because we've always been in Jane's point of view, right? Until now. And Neiman gives us Rochester's point of view. I'm going to be careful how much of it I read. All right, let me just give you what we have here. Silence and blackness surrounded me. I reached the ancient oak paneled door leading into the north tower and found it left widely open. At the gaping doorway, I reached up to the frame, feeling for the key, but it was not there. As I lowered my arm, a low laugh came almost at my ear. Much shaken, I collected myself, stood back, and placed the candle in my non-dominant hand, then slowly shut the door. There she stood, looking at me eye to eye, for she was quite tall, with a wild smile splitting her once pretty face as she triumphantly held up the key for me to see. You are looking for this, Edward? She asked in her low Creole tone. Give the key here, Bertha, I said, barely concealing my fury. She pouted. No, you want to lock me in that room upstairs. You hate me, I know. You want me to die there. Bertha, I warned, moving toward her carefully. You no longer love me, she said with exaggerated pathos. Give the key to me. How long has it been since last we bedded, my darling? But I remember how you like it. Shall we? Right here will do. With another hideous smile, she slid the shift from her shoulder. Wrath overtook me. Grabbing the key from her hand, I pocketed it, seized her arm, and flung the door to the north tower open again. She wrenched herself free of my grip and with both hands lunged for my throat. I threw the candle down and all light was gone. Now in complete darkness, with disgust and fury driving my actions, I shoved my attacker away, but she gave a savage scream and charged again. My hand tightened into a fist, and aiming by sound alone, I settled her with one well-planted blow to the face. She collapsed into a heap on the floor. In the blackness, I stood over her and rocked myself, my hands clasped over my mouth, suppressing the howls of agony rising from deep within. Never had I struck a woman in my life, and I was horrified. I should have restrained her, should have held her arms back. Not even in Jamaica, where I attended her in our airy clapboard marital home on a remote hilltop, oftentimes alone, did I resort to such a method of restraining her. How much the years of hopelessness had changed me. Was there no end to the misery this marriage would bring? I'm going to stop there. Because, what did I write? After this, he returns to Jane in his apartments, seduces her, lays her down on his couch, and gets to second base with her. Yeah. And Jane allows that. Yeah. So much could be said. I'm going to leave it at that. But Sarah's imagining of Rochester being saved from the fire, it's over here, on pages 328 to 330 of Sarah's novel is very nice. We're going to go there. So the fire aftermath, pages 328 to 330. And this is Rochester speaking, leaving Jane safe and warm in my room and entreating her to send no further alarm in the household, I took the candle she had provided me and rushed up the staircase to Bertha's apartment. I had thought to confront her, give release to my fury and fears that she had endangered me and the rest of the household, including Jane. But as I flung open the door, I found my wife struggling fiercely against Grace Poole. I managed to pry Bertha's fingers from Grace's throat, and with no other solution at hand, captured her in my own arms. I swallowed my anger and murmured soothing words until she quieted and could be put to bed. She demanded that I lie with her, that I be a man, but it was all I could do to remain calm, not to scream at her. As soon as I could, I left her there, locking the door behind me. In the front chamber, Grace was holding a cloth to the sore flesh of her neck. She has been disturbed all day, since you left, she said. She insists someone has invaded her house, but I thought she had calmed. I interrupted her. See that it does not happen again. Of course, she nodded. It cannot happen again. She stepped back as if I had struck her. I understand, she said. I thought I smelled alcohol on her breath. Were you drinking? She paused. Just my mug of porter. I felt my anger spiking once again, but I tamped it down. Surely Grace's life here was difficult, shut into this apartment with a madwoman. But Grace had come into it with her eyes open, knowing the ways of the mad, understanding what it would be. And now this carelessness, her drinking, had moments ago nearly cost me my life. I could not allow it. And yet I reminded myself, even as Bertha had worsened, Grace had never asked to be relieved. Her life had been a hard one, and this was most likely not the worst of it. I sighed. Make sure it is never more than one, I said, and left that wretched place. So he goes back to, do I want to read the rest of this? I don't want to get over much of this to you guys. I don't give over much of this to you guys. But basically, he goes back to the chamber. Jane is still there. She says good night, and he's like, "What? Are you quitting me already? And in that way?" And she's, "You said I might go, sir." She responded, but not without taking leave, not without a word or two of acknowledgement and goodwill, not, in short, in that brief, dry fashion. Why, you have saved my life. snatched me from a horrible and excruciating death, and you walked past me as if we were mutual strangers. At least shake hands. And she shakes hands with him. And though I know I said more of what I owed her, and too soon she fled when we heard Mrs. Fairfax stirring. She had saved my life in more ways than she knew. I would keep Bertha a secret from her, no matter what. I would do whatever I must to not lose Jane Eyre. Okay, so, yeah. There's no going to bed together in that scene. Right. And then, of course, we do have Charlotte's perfection. Would you like to read? Would you like to hear Charlotte's perfection of After the Fire? Of course you would. All right. So pages 204 to 206 in here. Oh, let's see. And this is from Jane's point of view. She's in Rochester's room as he goes. He went. I watched the light withdraw. He passed up the gallery very softly, unclosed the staircase door with as little noise as possible, shut it after him, and the last ray vanished. I was left in total darkness. I listened for some noise, but heard nothing. A very long time elapsed. I grew weary. It was cold in spite of the cloak, and then I did not see the use of staying, as I was not to rouse the house. I was on the point of risking Mr. Rochester's displeasure by disobeying his orders when the light once more gleamed dimly on the gallery wall, and I heard his unshod feet tread the matting. I hope it is he, thought I, and not something worse. He re-entered, pale and very gloomy. I have found it all out, said he, setting his candle down on the washstand. It is as I thought. How, sir? He made no reply, but stood with his arms folded, looking on the ground. At the end of a few minutes, he inquired in rather a peculiar tone. I forget whether you said you saw anything when you opened your chamber door. No, sir, only the candlestick on the ground. But you heard an odd laugh. You have heard that laugh before, I should think, or something like it? Yes, sir, there is a woman who sews here, called Grace Poole. She laughs in that way. She is a singular person. Just so. Grace Poole, you have guessed it. She is, as you say, singular. Very. Well, I shall reflect on the subject. Meantime, I am glad that you are the only person, besides myself, acquainted with the precise details of tonight's incident. You are no talking fool. Say nothing about it. I will account for the state of affairs, pointing to the bed. And now return to your own room. I shall do very well on the sofa in the library for the rest of the night. It is near 4. In 2 hours, the servants will be up. Good night, then, sir, said I, departing. He seemed surprised, very inconsistently so, as he had just told me to go. What? He exclaimed. Are you quitting me already? And in that way? You said I might go, sir, but not without taking leave, not without a word or two of acknowledgement and goodwill, not, in short, in that brief, dry fashion. Why, you have saved my life, snatched me from a horrible and excruciating death, and you walked past me as if we were mutual strangers. At least shake hands. And so they shake hands. They're very nice, and it's great. Okay. I think there's one more compare and contrast that I wanted to mention. That is the wind, the voices on the wind. We have this in Sarah's novel, of course, in Charlotte's novel, but we don't get to see it in Neiman's because we're only in part 1 of Neiman's. We don't have parts 2 and 3. So we don't get to the voices on the wind in there, but we do have them in Sarah's. So let's go to page 443. Hold on. All right, and we have the voices on the wind, and this is that supernatural element where Jane and Rochester are separated, as they must be, and St. John Rivers has proposed to Jane, and so she's in turmoil, emotional turmoil, not knowing what to do. And Rochester he has been blinded by the fire in his home and other things, and so he is alone and sad. So we go to, in Sarah's novel, we are in Rochester's point of view. We go to him at Ferndean, where he is ailing, convalescing, sitting beside my open window, feeling the air on my face. I imagined the moonlight and Jane somewhere, laying herself down from a busy day. Jane, I called out suddenly. Jane, Jane. And then more quietly, oh God, Jane. I expected no answer. Of course I did not. But in my mind, I thought I heard a voice. I am coming, it seemed to say. Wait for me. And a moment later, as if the wind in the pines itself was speaking, where are you? The sound of it echoed as if across the fells, though there were none near. Here, I said aloud, just here. And in Charlotte's book, we have Voices on the Wind. Jane is, she's sitting with St. John Rivers, and the rest of the house has gone quiet. They're just sitting alone, and she's having to decide whether or not she's going to marry him and go off on a mission with him. All the house was still, for I believe all, except St. John and myself, were now retired to rest. The one candle was dying out. The room was full of moonlight. My heart beat fast and thick. I heard its throb. Suddenly it stood still to an inexpressible feeling that thrilled it through and passed at once to my head and extremities. The feeling was not like an electric shock, but it was quite as sharp, as strange, as startling. It acted on my senses as if their utmost activity hitherto had been but torpor, from which they were now summoned and forced to wake. They rose expectant, eye and ear waited, while the flesh quivered on my bones. What have you heard? What do you see? Asked St. John. I saw nothing, but I heard a voice somewhere cry, Jane, 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 and nothing more. Oh God, what is it? I gasped. I might have said, where is it? For it did not seem in the room, nor in the house, nor in the garden. It did not come out of the air, nor from under the earth, nor from overhead. I had heard it, where or whence, forever impossible to know, and it was the voice of a human being, a known, loved, well-remembered voice, that of Edward Fairfax Rochester, and it spoke in pain and woe, wildly, eerily, urgently. I am coming, I cried. Wait for me. Oh, I will come. I flew to the door and looked into the passage. It was dark. I ran out into the garden. It was void. Where are you? I exclaimed. The hills beyond Marsh Glen sent the answer faintly back. Where are you? I listened. The wind sighed low in the firs. All was moorland loneliness and midnight hush. Wind and weather matter in all the Bronte's work, but this is a look at Rochester. So let's talk about Dr. Simon Marsden at the Bronte Conference on September 6th. He spoke of the European weather bringing conversion. It brought conversion to St. John Rivers. We see it bringing conversion to Edward when he's in Jamaica. So let's go to page in Sarah Shoemaker's novel. We see it bringing conversion to Edward in Jamaica. I don't know that Sarah was paying homage to Charlotte in putting this in here, but I want to think that she was because I think she knew what she was doing. So let's go to page 237 and 238. Edward is trying to he's at a crisis moment. Okay, he is actually holding a pistol to his head at this moment. Okay, he is having a crisis and he's trying to decide what to do with his life. He's wondering, what kind of life do I have? My wife is a mad woman. How am I going to get out of this? And a breeze comes upon him. But then a breeze came and brought with it a rainstorm. The skies opened and rain poured down, cleansing the air. I closed the window, pistol still in hand, and watched the rain pelt against the casement. As quickly as it had come, the storm was gone, moving off to the west. I opened the window again, and the air felt purer, and with it came a new sensibility. I laid the pistol back into its box and locked it away. I left the house then, my mind already working, and I strolled across the wet grass to the orchard, where I walked again among the trees. A sweet breath of wind from Europe was on my face, and I could sense the thunder of the distant Atlantic against the shore, and my heart swelled within me. There is a way, I thought. There has to be a way. If I must, I will take Bertha with me. She can be cared for as well as Thornfield as she is here. For England, Thornfield pulled on me now that I knew it could be mine and was mine. So he's making that decision to go. And it's because of that European wind. It's because of that European weather that's come in. Like Dr. Marsden was talking about with St. John Rivers in, St. John Rivers in his presentation yesterday. Yes. And I want to give Sarah credit for that. Okay, I also want to point out some very pretty passages that Sarah wrote in her novel, pages 163 and 237. Let's go to page 163. Oh, this is when Rochester has first gotten to Jamaica. Mm-hmm. The first thing one notices when one arrives in the West Indies from England is the light and what it does to everything one sees. It is as if one has entered into a different world where a veil has been removed and the sky is suddenly more intensely blue, the sea the deepest turquoise, the buildings starker white, the flora more vibrantly colored. One is assaulted with so much at once, the dialects of the citizens, the screech, strange and brilliant-hued birds, even in the city, and the vast array of exotic fruits and vegetables laid out for purchase, pomegranates, pineapples, avocados, mangoes, coconuts. The sheer variety of it all bewilders the mind while entrancing the senses. And the smells, they were not the odors of an English summer, roses and strawberries and new-cut hay. Although I could not yet identify the ones that greeted me now, they were richer, more intense, well matched for the kaleidoscope of colors on the island. Only the smell of horse manure in the streets was the same, and even there, with the hotter sun, the odors were stronger and sharper. A passing shower struck, a downpour really, but nearly as soon as it had started it was over, and the sun shone strong and clear again. It was not at all like a gentle summer rain in England, and I could not have been more disoriented. On page 237. On my return to Valley View, I took a walk in the orchard, the one place on the estate in which I felt true peace. In the evening breeze, the avocado leaves brushed against one another in a soothing rhythm, and a nearby parrot screeched into the night. The citrus scents of oranges and lemons surrounded me, and I closed my eyes and imagined myself at Thornfield. Would that it were so easy to transport oneself from one place to another with no cares and no responsibilities. After a time, I rose and went to the house and drank a mug of grog and another, and I finally managed to find my way to my own bed and fell into a deep sleep. To conclude, I want to say that Neiman's Rochester is incomplete, and we don't get to see Edward Rochester or Jane redeemed because it's incomplete. We get book one or part one of a three-part tome that Neiman was putting together. That's what I understand from the book, from the notes in the book. Okay. So it might be unfair of me to make any pronouncement about that book. Other than in my opinion, I did not enjoy it the way I enjoyed Sarah's book. Mr. Rochester by Sarah Shoemaker is a reimagining of Mr. Rochester that gives us an incredibly detailed childhood and backstory for Edward, and also an incredibly detailed backstory for Bertha and their marriage and how Rochester tried to help her and kept his promises and brought her to England, and how he got her to England and how he tried to take care of her. Incredibly detailed. So much foreshadowing and working all the details in. So well done. The middle part, that book 2 where we're in Jamaica, that part felt to me as if it was slower than the other 2 parts of the book. Maybe that's because I knew, okay, he's marrying Bertha. I know that's going to happen. She's going mad. I know that's going to happen. There's no way that can be changed. So that's not a surprise to me. So I was maybe I was in a hurry for that part to be done and get over with. I don't know. Maybe that's just my experience. But book 2 of these 3 books that are in here felt like it drug a little bit to me. The other 2 books moved much more quickly to me. I told you during the review and discussion of it that there were moments in this book where I went, ah, where I gasped in surprise at things that were happening, even though I know the story, the basic story of Rochester from Jane Eyre. There were moments where I gasped. There were moments where I was surprised by things. There were moments where Sarah Shoemaker put new pieces to the story in through her imagination, through her imaginative retelling of Rochester's life that made me go, whoa, all right. And parts of it that I found intriguing, and I was accepting of the changes that Sarah was putting in for us. I was okay with it. So that was just very well done. And you guys, I was so very pleased that I got to attend, even if it was online and virtual, so very pleased that I got to attend the 2025 Bronte Conference, because so much information, there was so much rich information to gather from that conference. I do want to fully encourage everyone to, get your membership to the Bronte Society. It's not that expensive. It really isn't. And when you get that membership, you can have the Bronte Studies and the Bronte Cassette delivered to you digitally, or for like an extra £5 a year, I think it is. You can get the Bronte Studies delivered to you in print format to your home, even over here in the States. So it's not that expensive of a venture to become a member of the Bronte Society and have all of that information delivered to you, downloaded into your brain. So I'm just very glad that I was able to participate in that and use some of the stuff I was learning and hearing and bringing into my soul yesterday to this video today, to my script for you guys for today. Also, I just want to say one more time, obviously I'm a fan of Jane Eyre. Obviously I'm a fan of Charlotte Bronte and all the Bronte works. I enjoy the stuff very much, and I always have. And I have found ways to like interject little bits and pieces into the stuff I write. I just do. I pay homage to Charlotte where I can, where it fits, where it works, because I adore and admire her so much. And if you were to pick up a copy of Choices Meant for Gods, you will see little bits and pieces just randomly hidden, tucked in there. There's one in Choices Meant for Gods that is not hidden at all. There's one in Choices Meant for Kings that is not hidden at all. And I think that Bronte fans, when they see it, would probably be like, oh, there it is. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Just little things like that. I enjoy doing stuff like that as a writer. Even though this is epic fantasy, there's hints of Jane Eyre hidden inside there. I mean, the world building, the map, there's stuff on the map that, yeah, this is stuff that I enjoy doing because I'm such a nerd about the Brontes. You guys, this has been a long one. Thank you for sticking around. Thank you for sitting through it with me. I hope that you found bits and pieces that you enjoyed. I hope that I have encouraged you to pick up your copy of Sarah Shoemaker's Mr. Rochester. I mean, it was 2017. It's been a hot minute. So I didn't feel at all worried about giving away spoilers because it's been a little while. And everyone knows the story of Jane Eyre and Mr. Rochester anyway. You guys, give this video a thumbs up. Not just because it was incredibly long, but because there was cool stuff about Mr. Rochester and the imagining of Mr. Rochester and his past, all the things he went through. You guys, thumbs up for Charlotte Bronte. Yeah. And the wonderful character that she gave us. See you in the next one.